Like making it okay. Um, so my guest today is Kelly Douglas. He is a writer who focuses a lot on advocacy for mental health and disabilities. Um, so, like Kelly, could you maybe tell us a little bit about the work you do?
Yeah, definitely. So my name's Kelly Douglas. I'm 25 years old. I'm from Santa Barbara, California, and primarily I am a writer. Um, I am a freelance writer, but I also do a lot of mental health writing and a lot of writing about disability. I'm somebody who lives with at least one of each, if I like to say. I have anxiety, depression, and am in recovery from anorexia nervosa. I also am living with cerebral palsy, so I have both a disability and a mental health condition, which has really connected me to that type of writing and has been able to help me add a more personal component to my work.
Like, where are some of the websites you do most of your work at?
I absolutely love writing for the Mighty. They are a health website, and they have expanded since I believe 2014 from covering, a few different mental health, disability, and chronic illness topics to covering a whole range of things from the current COVID-19 pandemic to rare diseases to chronic illnesses and disabilities and mental health conditions. They're one of the biggest health sites on the internet right now in terms of views and submissions. And outside of that, I've done a lot of freelance work in other areas. I've written about tech, I've written about food. Um, but I think that the thing that I always come back to is that mental health and disability aspect, because personally, knowing people from those communities and being part of those communities myself, I just find it so important.
Like, when did you first start talking about your disability, like on the internet?
So I first started revealing that I have cerebral palsy on the internet about 3.5 years ago. Prior to that, I was extremely closed off about it. I was uncomfortable with that piece of my identity, and I consciously hid it essentially as best I could. I have very mild cerebral palsy, so a lot of times I pass as able bodied. And I spent around 9 years of my life from age 12 to age 21 hiding behind that and not talking about it, sometimes even actively telling little white lies, like, oh, I'm just clumsy, in order to detract attention away from that and to let people get to know me outside of that piece of my identity. But when I was 21, I realized that that was actively harming me. It was actually hurting my mental health. And so I needed to start speaking out about it and writing about it, which I did starting in January of 2017 and continuing on to today.
So like, how did it feel to do that? Like, did you get like a lot of feedback early on with it, or you kind
Yeah,
of?
definitely. The first time I was extremely anxious because this was essentially my big secret being splashed all over the internet. And while I know that, not a lot of people are searching cerebral palsy articles on the internet, so I knew that not everyone would read it. And that was kind of a comfort to me. I did know that a lot of people, family and friends were going to be reading it. And some of them had never heard me talk about it openly. Some of them didn't even know that I have CP. So that aspect was really nerve wracking. But I posted the article on social media on my Facebook page, and the support was absolutely overwhelming. Um, I had people saying, I had no idea that you were, struggling with this internal battle for so long. Um, you're really brave, you're a really strong person to now finally be speaking out about it. And I had expected, to receive a mixture of positive and negative feedback, like, the occasional, but you lied kind of thing. But nobody had that mindset. Everyone was thankfully very supportive. So I'm very fortunate and privileged in that way.
Um, so, like, when did you start writing about like mental health related topics?
It was shortly before I started writing about disability. I was published for the first time in 2016, actually, with an article about my mental health. So it was September. And then the next January was when I opened up about my CP. So it was only a few months prior that I'd even started writing for publications, but immediately out of the gate, I was very drawn to that mental health aspect. I felt like I had held that in enough, and I really needed to talk about that too.
Do you feel like writing is sort of like a type of therapy for you?
Definitely, in a way, yes. I find it extremely therapeutic to be able to process my feelings that way and my thoughts, especially when I am doing something more personal like health writing, because I get to actively draw from my experiences, write about issues that are important to me, and essentially process all of those feelings as they come up. Um, I mean, I wouldn't recommend it in lieu of actual therapy.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
definitely do that too. But actually, some of the things that have been really heavy that I've needed to bring up in therapy, I've brought writing into it, and I've read pieces of writing, and it's made it easier to talk about some of those health topics in therapy settings when I'm not sure that my therapist would understand otherwise.
Like, how has it felt to have like I mean, because I've like read some of your writing. Like, it's been published like in a lot of different places. Like, how is it? Like Yahoo's one example. Um, I saw some stuff on the Thought catalog. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so like, how does it feel to just have so many people like kind of supporting your work like that?
It definitely feels wonderful. When I started off writing, first of all, I didn't expect to go in a health direction at all. But secondly, I didn't anticipate that it would be something that I would continue to sustain for, upwards of 4 years now. And I definitely didn't anticipate that I would get published on multiple sites. I thought, this is a pipe dream. This isn't going to happen. And then, I started branching out and it started happening for me, which felt really, really wonderful. I think that I do still get a little rush of excitement every time something's published, because it is exciting to know that your work's there. And I always want to stay connected and grounded to that piece of me that realizes that I'm very lucky and privileged to be able to do this.
So like right now, um, what are some things you might like to tell people about about mental health or disability?
I think that the top thing I would tell people about mental health right now, because I think with COVID-19, we're all struggling in some capacity with mental health, either because we already have pre existing mental health conditions or our mental health has been on a steady decline because of quarantine. I would say that my top piece of advice for mental health is, first of all, if you're comfortable, when you're comfortable, continue talking about it. We need a lot of openness surrounding it. And it's amazing when you do open up how many people will say, I've been through that too. I'm struggling with this as well. I also say if your mental health is currently on a downhill decline sort of state, I think it's really important that you take care of it in any way you need to without the guilt that sometimes comes along with self-care. Like take a warm bath, read a book, take a 5-minute break even. Do we're all we all have different levels of privilege in terms of what types of self-care we can do, but just take what little time you have and use it in a way that revitalizes you. In terms of disability, I'd say I think that it is important to acknowledge people's disabilities because of issues like accessibility and certain things that we might be struggling with. They are relevant, but not to necessarily concentrate all of your attention there because outside of a disability identity, we're all regular people. We have jobs, we have lives, we have families, we're, in relationships, dating. And so I think that it is important to see the disability, but also see that we're all multifaceted individuals with a lot of ability and potential to offer the world.
So you study psychology.
Yes, I studied psychology in college and I earned my bachelor's.
So what do you want to do with that? Maybe.
So I've worked in all kinds of settings and some of them have used my psychology degree more than others. I used to be a respite care worker um, for clients with disabilities. So that was a very heavy use of psychology. But what I intend to do with it in the future is when the time's right, I'd love to go to law school and actually use it in a more legal capacity. Um, Hopefully eventually prosecuting criminals, but there are other areas of law that I'd like to start out in because getting into criminal prosecution is hard. Um, so whether I'm applying it to understanding a criminal's motive or I'm applying it to, workers' rights or I'm applying it to special education law, I think that there's definitely a place for psychology degree in the legal field.
Yeah. And then also you're a senior editor for a website called Unwritten. Can you maybe talk a little
Yeah.
bit about
Yeah. So Unwritten is a millennial lifestyle publication. Um, so essentially, it is a website where people who are part of Gen Y and on that Gen Y, Gen Z cusp talk about issues that are important to millennials. So we have all kinds of pieces on the site about health, food, relationships, dating, going to college, grad school, starting off in the workforce. Um, but I became an editor for Unwritten about 2.5 years ago in March of 2018. And it's been a really wonderful experience because it's launched me from writing into editing. And writing is my first love, but editing is definitely somewhere where my heart is at. I absolutely love like polishing pieces, making them like ready and getting them to a point where the writer's work can really shine. So editing is one of my favorite things in the world next to writing.
So outside of writing, like what are some of your favorite things to do, like hobbies or anything like that?
I mean, pre-COVID, I loved spending time with friends. That looks a little bit different
Yeah.
now um, because we're all being cautious, wearing masks, social distancing. So I haven't seen some of my friends in a while, but I'm so excited to see them again. I love watching true crime things, whether that's TV shows or movies. I love documentaries. I love listening to music. I have tons and tons and tons of playlists for every different mood. And it's always fun to spend just a few minutes at a time listening to music, even. And I also absolutely adore my cat, and petting her is a huge stress reliever. So while that probably doesn't count as a hobby, I love doing that as well.
Um, so like what are some of what's like a current project you're working on right now?
So currently, I'm really, really excited because I'm kind of in this phase where I'm tackling a lot of different writing topics at once. I'm not necessarily concentrated solely in health like I used to be. It's still a huge part of my writing, but I'd say that my current project just involves um, writing more from a place of experimenting with different styles, trying journalism, trying lists, trying humor pieces, satire. I feel like I've done it all this year, which was kind of my goal and my project for 2020. So I'm really pleased with how that's coming out and how many different areas and topics and styles I've been able to expand into.
Well, thank you for talking to me today, Kelly.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
having me.